Buenos días aquí en.
Good morning to everyone following us here at the Euskalduna in Bilbao, where Mobility City project is going to be one of the main topics of the morning. Thanks to all of you following us here on site and those of you who are following us on streaming and the speakers as well. First of all, we would like to introduce our project, Mobility City. And we can see that this is an initiative that fostered by Fundación Ibercaja to promote a single space at the Bridge Pavilion in Zaragoza to study everything that has to do with mobility. The new mobility we will talk about over the morning today and also over the coming days in the Congress has to do with a few social, economic and technological goals that you can see here on the screen. There could be more, but they have an impact in the economy, the environment and the society. So all the change processes we're going through now. There are 4 key steps here: sustainability, connectivity, autonomy, and service. All of them into mobility, and they require, like I say, a new society that wants to communicate differently. And that's why we tackle all these dimensions: social, environmental, and economic, which are for us, as a Mobility City project, 3 key elements that are included in the existing rules as well. And since we started, all the norms and rules are changing in order to normalize something that technology already allowed, which is everything that has to do with new propulsions, the digitalization of transport mobility. And we have summarized here some of the initiatives that have been tackled at the European environment concerning mobility, but also concerning the state, with new laws, new acts that will be implemented and adopted soon, like mobility and public transport financing, in a context where European countries must now respect the Green Deal with all the rules and rights it will imply for citizens, and mobility will be one of them. Our project takes place in Zaragoza, a privileged place. As you can see, the Expo 28 pavilions, and there are services, offices, and everything in there, but there are also many singular spaces. I would say some of them are very singular, and one of them is the Bridge Pavilion, designed by Zaha Hadid, who was the author of this area urban plan, where we are here now. In a city that not only has these pavilions, but also the metal industry related to the car industry, the train and railway industry as well. And a city that's betting clearly on logistics and transport, public transport and mobility want to become different there. And there have been a certain public investment, for instance, for the anti-fog system, have turned this city into the second destination for air freight cargo in Spain. So Zaragoza is becoming increasingly important in this sense due to the new structures that we have at the airport. Why Ibercaja? This is a frequent question. Well, this foundation has contributed to the development of the territory and the country, and that's why we work on projects like Mobility City, and also to show the value of its missions. Mainly, it has mainly 2 missions: receiving dividends of CajaBanco, and then participate into social activities and actions with projects such as this one, as Mobility City. And And the foundation is clearly committed to the sustainable goals. It also worked in since 28 in order to see what we could do with the new expo after the Expo of Seville. And the challenge afterwards was to reset all these spaces, transform them so that citizens could use them after the expo. And one of the things we did was this project. Besides, the project has a strong public support. We want Zaragoza to become a national reference in the 21st century. If we were already in a privileged position, mobility project has, well, this is Javier Lambano, the president of Aragon, who explained that in this declaration, but there are many other public entities that back our project. I think Mobility City is an initiative for the present and the future that will allow us to have a debate on the future mobility. And since from the ministry, we are committed to tackle these topics in the sustainable mobility table. This is the Ministry of Industry, Reyes Maroto, who visited our site and to get to know, acquainted with the project. And she did understand that this was a target project where important things could be done. She called it the Sustainable Mobility Table. Today it's called the Automotion or Automobile Table. And this is something that has been created thanks to, in part, to our project. And then we have this bridge pavilion. It is a magnificent work. It's a magnificent project inspired in the talent of its creator, Faha Hadid. And this is the best venue for such a project. Our dream would be to transform this bridge pavilion in a sort of Guggenheim, and we are not there yet. But we think that with this architecture, which is almost like a sculpture, it's 300-meter long, 2 floors, and a very singular, is one of the few inhabitable bridges that we have in Spain and Europe. And it required an important financial effort in investments. It cost 84 million euros, almost like a Guggenheim museum. So, of course, it's logical to try to do something important there. We're going to divide the space into areas. Functionality for us was key. It will still be a bridge. So it will allow people to cross over the river with limitations, of course, of amount of people and so on, but the space will be open to the city. We want citizens to want to go there. And, of course, we as a city think this is interesting for many reasons, but our goal is to have it open to a large public that will be able to access and get to know this very special space. So one part will be linked to the experiences related to mobility, with an important investment in audiovisual technologies, in content, very interactive content. We've changed a few things due to COVID. And in order to do that, we are now finishing some works there. We've invested 4 million euros. Like I said at the beginning, the Aragon government with Fundación Ibercaja is participating. And with these 4 million, we've closed the building so that it can actually be inhabited. And we've also set passive security measures. And in Ibercaja, we are contributed to this technological and technical deployment. An innovation space where anyone can go, everyone can go. And We talk a lot about electric cars, transport digitalization, but in order to move on with that, we need consumers of those technologies. So we want to attract institutes, enterprises, companies that can show their products. And we will also participate in spaces like this one in SE1 Bilbao. And our spaces will also be able to use for this kind of conferences or workshops in summer to motivate people, to raise curiosity on these new technologies, etc. For that, we have also selected a space next to the bridge. This space is at the south of the bridge, and it was important for us to have a space where we could test products. These are some images of the inauguration. We started using it a few weeks ago, and the idea is to convey information on the new mobility mechanisms to citizens and many other things. This building looks like a bus stop, but it's actually a very singular building by Carlos Ratti, a very well-known architect. He's the Italian Calatrava, we could say. And he's the director of the City Lab in Harvard, and it's the only building by him in Spain. And if you want, you can come and visit it. It's actually a fountain, and it's a very singular building, like I say. Cities discovered a long time ago that their future depends on mobility. If cities don't solve the mobility issues, they will be trapped in noise, pollution, accidents. We are working to expand this testing area to other domains like trucks or cars. And we are working with institutions in order to establish relationships with the public sector. And we will also be participating in another event soon in Zaragoza on mobility. But meanwhile, like I say, we are working, we're carrying works in the building, organizing things, and also we want to create a community of partners associated to a project. We've been carrying out about 70 activities per year. Some of them are sectorial, other are academic conferences open to the public. Like I say, around 70 yearly activities. Some of them are carried out in Zaragoza, in our venues, and others are organized in other cities like Madrid, etc. So these are the things that we will do this year, the ones you can see on screen. Many of them are related to the chairs we will talk about soon. And we also have a mobility observatory with polls to see the trends. And we want to create some sort of information repository. We did the same thing in Madrid. And we are also participating in other activities like the European Week of Mobility. And this year, we're taking an important leap. In a few weeks, the Mobility City Awards will take place in Madrid to recognize local and general activities. And also, we also participate in chairs. We have research experts that are working on this, and we can contribute in innovation, research, information. And the chair actually is a way of cooperating with that. The fact of being able to contribute from the university, from the Technology and Architecture School to this project means showing all the know-how, all the research results of this university in order to have a more sustainable and better mobility for the future. The two local universities, the San Jorge one and the Public University of Zaragoza, have different interest domains. But with the public university, we are working with a group that was already working before with the group in Aragon related to mobile communications. And in the case of San Jorge University, we are working on a system to carry out video games activities in this bridge. And the last one was carried out with the University Alfonso X. And the idea is to generate words that stimulate interesting projects, and in order to transform some of those projects in spin-offs with new entrepreneurs that have new ideas. And we are trying to attract that kind of projects to Zaragoza. And we would like to create the Innovation Days, which are 2 yearly editions of presentations of startups to the partners of Mobility City. We have a weekly project with newsletters, and all of this is done thanks to the fact that the project has seduced and interested many different entities that wanted to know our initiatives. You can see them on screen. You may know some of them, maybe not others. These are local clusters, public institutions, companies, industrial companies, Feldex for capitalization, they transport the signals, or the CSIC, the research institute in Spain, with which we collaborate. We have about 50 entities that are interested in becoming partners or members. The ONCE Foundation as well. And that's why we wanted to do this presentation and say here in Bilbao that we need private alliances. This is one of the axes of this conference. But we also need an understanding between different sectors, because it's necessary to make a change and to involve everyone. That's why we have invited to participate in this presentation 3 speakers very much related to our project. And we are bound to them not only by an interest, but also by a partner relationship. So I'd like to invite, please, Filippo Brunelleschi, country manager of SPIN for Spain and Portugal. This is the micromobility division of Ford company. Also, Zoilo Rios, board advisor of the State Conference of Petrol Station. And José Luis Borao, accessibility director of the ONCE Foundation. I'll now show another presentation that we have prepared.
Un segundito. Si me puedes ayudar con la presentación, si no te importa. Sería para poner esta en presentación. Si no, quita la otra. ¿Ha muerto? No, ahí está. Quita la grande. Bien, mientras fluye la presentación.
Well, we're trying to set the presentation, but like I said, we have 3 representatives of different entities that are interested in our project. And today we want to talk about alliances between different sectors in order to generate one single sector, the mobility sector. Like I said before, we talk about the necessary public and private alliance in order to develop the mobility sector. But of course, we need to know the different sectors so that this becomes possible. Now here you can say on screen, we believe that we need a strong mobility sector that needs to face 3 factors. whenever we analyze our project, we think that our mobility vision must include these three elements. What can we do? This is given by the industrial technological capacity. What we will be allowed to do, which is more related to the norms, the acts, etc. And what do we want to do? Where do we want to go to as a society? And some economic elements need to conquer different spaces. We need to regulate security and safety, knowing what the needs are, and all of that in a context where people are absolutely at the core of everything. And I'm sure this will be said many times in this conference. At Mobility Center, we tend to say that sectors that used to be competitors in the past will need to cooperate in the future. And by that we mean that those sectors need to, yes, compete and cooperate at the same time. So we need to create synergies and be able to manage the change with this maybe new word we could use, that is co-opetition, a mixture between cooperation and competition. And our first speaker will be Filippo Brunelleschi. He has a long experience in the mobility sector. He's been a key person in Cabify deployment in the world. He knows the sector in and out. And we would like to ask him several questions and try to see with him how a parent company that comes from the automotive sector wants to conquer a new space, the micro-mobility sector, because they have understood that this is what they need to sell as a service now, a new service. So we have a very straightforward question for Filippo, and it is whether the citizens that want to buy a car, they will actually buy a car or sign a mobility plan. Well, first of all, thank you very much to Jaime and Mobility City, Ibercaja Foundation for having me here. From the point of view of Ford, and I would dare to say from all the manufacturers, we know that the population will keep growing in the coming years. And nevertheless, several manufacturers, some of them have already set a date, 2025, they think that there will be a drop in the sales of cars. And maybe due to this transition, we talk a lot about the electrical transition. And this is just part of the issue of pollution and sustainability. But when we talk about sustainability, it's not only the CO2 emissions, it's sustainability for the society and for the citizens. So the transition to the electric cars, yes, but we still have a question whether this is an electric car or a petrol car will be parked a lot of time, and it occupies part of the public space. So as an engineer, if someone says that something that's costly, that requires maintenance, etc., is only used 3% of your time, I can tell you, you don't need it. Now, within this scope or this view or reflection that comes from the opportunity of the technological developments, Ford thinks that the change is about to come, and it will be quite a radical change, which is setting aside the property concept, because we tend to buy a lot today. And for instance, in streaming, with streaming platforms, we have already started to pay per use. And this is the idea. The implications it has in logistics, in the society, and in the environment would be very important. So the transition to this non-property or shared property model is something that has already arrived in other technological sectors, and it will probably expand to other sectors. So, among others, the mobility of cars. So, yes, this transition will still last quite a few years, and it will, of course, depend on the new norms and rules that will come up. But we will take further steps to shift from property to another kind of mobility. For instance, I myself use my wife's car to take my kids to school, and the rest of the day I use public transportation. Yes, the micromobility solution companies used to be small, but now you say Ford is interested in this niche, and you are seeing that this big companies are also ready to do that, or they're not only ready to do it, they must do it. We know it's an important part of mobility. We've had a lot of startups since Cabify. We've seen that there's a huge need for innovation, and much of this innovation comes from startups. So they are crucial. But at a certain point, you need some maturity, if I can say that. And it's not just about opening another company and asking for more funding and surviving till after tomorrow. No, we must have a midterm, at least a midterm vision. And I've been talking to one of the most influent architects and urbanists in Spain. And he used to say, he told us that over the past 100 years, we've worked mainly with OTs in vertical elevators and also other kinds of mobility. So everything we do has an impact in urban mobility, and Ford has contributed very much in building today's cities. And for the future, Ford wants to continue fostering these projects concerning shared mobility or micro mobility, but from a more mature and solid point of view. Well, from your experience, you've seen how a small company like Cabify started as a startup and then expanded to other environments and made the most of an opportunity given by technology, by its vision, and by a regulation frame that still had to be defined. And you were very quick and agile, and you conquered space and responded to needs that people had not detected yet. So I'd like to know that relationship of small companies with the big ones will be an addition, or will be a dialogue between equals, or maybe some startups have already become unicorns and now cost millions of euros in the stock. In Cabify, we are 35 people. It's grown quite a lot since the beginning. In 2016, we shifted from 100 to over 1,000 people. So the scalability has been important. We need both. They complement each other, but they don't always overlap. And we need the impulse of the startups with our more agile structures. But on the other side, we need a more solid company that needs to have a clearer vision for the future and who need to question, well, this is how things have been up to date, up to today, but this is what will happen in the future. Now we need to set the means to develop all the necessary changes. Sometimes it's a complementary work, so they don't overlap. But in other cases, they do overlap. Now we are working with Cabify in order to integrate our mobility service in their platform. And there are still many integration possibilities at a technological level. Thank you, Felipe. We will come back to you with a common question for the three speakers on alliances. But if you allow me, I will now move on to the next speaker, coming from the State Conference of Petrol Stations. Zoilo Rios, are we going to, how much are we going to consume, how many kilowatts, etc. And everything that has to do with alliances as well. So, good morning. And he's also a very curious businessman that always bets on differential service. I think your microphone is moving, and I don't know if you could hear you well when you speak. I think that should be fine. So from your experience as a curious businessman, always trying to look for new space, you represent about 4,000 entrepreneurs of petrol stations. And you're in a delicate situation, like a sort of like a flaming sword or sort of Damocles situation, because you have to work with a very high level of demands from as far as regulations are concerned. So you are also at the core of many public decisions. You need to ensure a minimum network according to the services and how much you sell. And at the same time, you're seeing how other competitors, thanks to the reforms in the technical code, are now searching for are now trying to get your place. And it will all start with one question: where will we charge our electric vehicles? In a petrol station or at the supermarket parking lot? Well, first of all, thank you, Jaime, and thanks to the organization for inviting me to participate in this very interesting event. I'd like to answer your question, Jaime, and we now have a vision of the present of the petrol stations, which is something we need to tend to, and also the future. And we need to have a look at the United Kingdom, see what happened when they run short of fuel. So we are now respecting all the obligations we have, but at the same time we need to adapt all our petrol station having double wall deposits, etc. So doing something that actually we know will not work in the future. Right now in Spain, 54% of cars work with diesel and the rest with fuel. And this is the reality, and we now need to shift from a petrol station to a mobility service station with the energy that's demanded. And at the same time, we need to become a multi-energy service station. So our concept is that we won't have one single kind of car, either electric or with hydrogen or methane. We will, of course, turn to more sustainable ways of energy, but there will be a range of products and services that we will need to sell to the different kinds of cars. So we will keep giving mobility services and offering those services and recharge services. My company has existed for almost a century. I'm the third generation, and my great-grandfather and my grandfather used to tend to carriages, to coaches with horses. They were horse-drawn carriages, and that's what they did. And things have changed, of course. So in the future, what will happen? Well, we will charge our cars, of course, at home for those who can use a slow charging point there. And then there's another possibility, which are places like hypermarkets, malls, offices, or companies where you can charge your car. And of course, the fast charging, which is absolutely necessary in our sector, when your battery has run out, then you need to go to a service station or petrol station. So we will have these three modes of doing things. Okay, so this variety in the way of charging mean maybe that you need to cooperate with other sectors. With which kind of sectors do you think you can establish partnerships more easily in order to give your services in the future? Well, I think with many sectors in this transition, the challenge is huge. And we need to search for those alliances in different sectors. Well, we have already done that. We've looked for alliances because, like I said before, we are a station that's in strategic points in our highways. And we have already established conventions with distributors, because in our shops we used to have 3 or 4 articles or items in sale, and now they are huge, almost huge supermarkets. And we have also expanded the opening times, but we will keep offering cleaning services for cars, battery exchange services, and we also will establish partnerships with battery manufacturers, also for parking lots, because truck drivers demand more and more surveillance in their parking lots, and there are also very interesting logistic solutions for a freight exchange, for instance. Or other kinds of services like freight or delivery. And this is something we're starting to do, hand over in our stations. So let's not forget that 70% of cars are parked in the streets in Spain. So we will need to reach agreements with energy companies to set charging points. And biomethane development is very interesting. It's not so much developed in Spain, but we have a huge potential from the agricultural sectors who, because of their emissions, we can transform them in mobility usable methane. And in order to generate green hydrogen as well, through solar energy as well. And there are many ways to generate hydrogen, green hydrogen for mobility. And of course, alliances with individual mobility sectors. let me set an example. You arrive in a city with your car, you come from another city, you park it, and then you decide to use either a car sharing or a bike sharing system, and we can also be a hub for this kind of mobility exchange. Yes, so you are saying that apart from the supply, you can also offer services. Like I see, it's a very holistic way of seeing the services you can offer. And you've already said that the capacities, synergies, and alliances offer many possibilities in your case. And I would even say that you very much need them. So this is something we will all need. Yes, of course, we all need each other. And in our petrol stations, we also try to have people tending our users so that they can get their fuel or charge their cars, so they have someone there to help them. Thank you very much, Zoilo. We were talking about people and how different we are, because we do have common needs, but we don't all have exactly the same needs, right? And a foundation like ONCE can detect very easily the different needs for different people. We talked about connected mobility, green mobility, but we must also talk about accessible mobility. 20 years ago, we were only trying to lower down the different steps at the street so that people in wheelchairs could use them. But now we are going far beyond that with sensorial aspect, cognitive aspects to make spaces accessible to all. And you play a crucial role in that. You are the big reference of this sector, which has been traditionally called the handicap sector or the different functionality sector. But I'd like to know, are you speaking with other stakeholders, and how can you lead that dialogue or generate that dialogue? Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting us to participate here and giving us a voice to talk about people. We don't like to talk about impaired people or handicapped people or some things like that. It's just people. And here we can talk about efficiency, kilowatt, electric cars. And in the end, maybe we don't talk so much about people. But we need to take people into account. They must be at the core of everything. At the beginning, it was said, well, do you think these autonomous cars are necessary? Well, maybe we need to ask people. For people with disabilities, it's absolutely necessary. We need to ask them. And like you were saying, I'm afraid the sound is not reaching well my booth, and unfortunately I can't interpret until I get a good sound. Sorry about that.
Pensando en todas las personas, ¿no? Que es lo lógico de cualquier proceso de diseño o de creación, ¿no? Por supuesto que las alianzas para nosotros como Fundación ONCE y como Grupo Social ONCE es esencial. Nosotros solo somos una gente que hablamos de personas y que podemos dar nuestro punto de vista para, pues bueno.
And we can give our point of view to gather people that use cities in a different way and to make them see that they must be at the core for public entities, administrations, companies at state level, regional level, local level. They are our allies, but also the private companies as well. And their goals might be different from ours. They have more financial or economic goals, but we believe that they are the ones who must set in place this idea, this way of seeing things from the human rights point of view, from the equality point of view, from including everyone in all the developments in life, either it could be mobility, work, health. Thank you, José Luis. Of course, if we go to your foundations, to your institution and see what you're doing, there's something very important, that's innovation support through a group of startups where you try to have initiatives that aim at improving our daily life, have a visibility, but you're mainly working on you're working a lot on mobility. Everything that has to do with simple icons, simple images, signaling, making spaces accessible and easy to access. And you're an architect, and we could talk about that for a long time, but from your experience at ONCE, how can you make those companies understand that, yes, technology is very well, but through your universal access, etc., you can be incubators. And many times we shouldn't only focus on technology, but we should focus more on how we apply technology, in examples like yours. So how do you do that? Well, like I said before, in startups, we help them take people into account, have people at the core of their decisions. And specifically this 10-15% of our population that has different needs and that uses our spaces in a different way from the conventional one. At ONCE Foundation, of course, we need to take into account the acceleration and the incubators. And many years ago, we set a company incubator, a startup incubator, to have people at the core of all these initiatives. And many of them focus on mobility, on improving the life conditions of disabled people in the cities. For instance, their parking spots for them, and people who need a tracking, people with limited cognitive skills, who need tracking while they move from one place to the other, and different things that help people with disability go from one point of the city to the other. And of course, always thinking about designing for all. We don't want to create solutions that are only for disabled people. Universal accessibility means that it's beneficial for all. You were talking about the signaling and icons and pictograms. Of course, for anyone, it's much simpler to move in a metro network that has different colors for each line, or in a hospital where you can very easily recognize different areas with different colors, different icons. And of course, people with cognitive disabilities need that. This is essential for them. But it could also be interesting for people who don't have cognitive disabilities. It will make our life much easier. So when we were reaching this room in this building, which is an architecture reference nationally and maybe internationally, I'm wondering who didn't have trouble choosing the right elevator or the right stairs. So if it's complicated for us, it's much more complicated for people who have disabilities. But like I say, even for people without disabilities, it can be very interesting, very useful, and make our life much easier. And we must give these people the opportunity to use these technologies depending on their needs. Thank you very much, José Luis. From your accelerator, you're certainly helping to turn some spaces into easier spaces, more intuitive spaces. Like we said, with the signaling, the QR codes, which work so well. And now, to wrap up, I would like for us to talk about one final point. With which sectors do you think you can generate alliances easily? And especially alliances that allow us to transfer the results more easily to the society. Where do you think this matching will come from? Well, I loved what José Luis was saying, talking about persons, people, and universal mobility. And it's surprising because, like we said before, we entered the micromobility world with rollers. It was very innovative, but we didn't have much vision with the scooters. And the thing is that we now know we need to include everyone. We are now cooperating with the CERNI on micromobility in Spain, and we are the first stakeholder that contacted them. And we showed them the technology of this vehicle that already integrate everything of the adapts of the cars, like cameras in the cars, where you can park or not, where you can drive or not, etc. And this is something we want to do in order to include all the collectives. And sustainability, again, is not only about CO2 emissions, it's about including everyone. That's what universal mobility is about. And within this universal mobility, we must include all the sectors with cooperation sectors. Of course, CERMI, but I would love to cooperate with ONCE Foundation. And we are talking about also the future petrol stations and about integrating the basis of society. And it's clear how that integration is the path to follow in the future. Thank you, Filippo. Zoilo. Recently, we said that the first 16 won't succeed without the 17th. So the alliances are necessary, like we say. But well, you talked about this before, about how you can diversify your services, in which interest domains you're focusing. Of course, energy, public services, etc. But
análisis que tenéis en la Confederación.
From your point of view in the Federation, I'd like you to tell us how the present situation with electricity high prices can hinder the car electrification deployment, which is facing different difficulties, the crisis in manufacturing with less car manufacturing, and other issues such as autonomy, price, etc. Maybe it's better if you use the microphone. So I'd like to know, well, of course, if you can deepen on alliances, you can do that, but I would also like for you to tell us a couple of words on how this price situation can impact you as public charging point suppliers and the impact it can also have in the market and for the citizens. Do you have any specific data on that, any figures? Well, firstly, I think that the challenge ahead of us is so big in the society, in the world, against climate change, so that the 17th goal is absolutely necessary. We must all work together, all the actors, all the stakeholders, and not think that just one of us will eat the whole pie. We must all share the pie. So if we want a sustainable and inclusive, fair transition, we must count on all the sectors. Our sector employs 50,000 people in Spain, so it has a role to play. And if there is already a network with licenses, with activity that's working well, then we shouldn't start from scratch. And it's not either about imposing, because we were talking about regulations and obligations, but that's not the way. I think imposing is not the way. We must convince. And concerning electricity, there are many barriers. In some of our stations, we cannot set charging points because the electricity network is supposed not to be powerful enough, or we should invest on a transformer. So using only one single kind of technology is dangerous, energy is dangerous. I think we should diversify, maybe not being too ambitious, but reducing emissions, yes. Of course, the high prices in electricity don't help. The price has tripled. And it's become 3 times as expensive for citizens to charge their cars at home. So shifting from petrol to electricity might mean that prices will increase even more. So it's important to do this transition right in Spain and in the world. And then stocking. One of the difficulties of electricity is the stocks. We have electric vectors like green hydrogen that offer this possibility, but all these must also be regulated. We must know when, who, where, with which certifications and so on. And this is it. There's something we need to do previously. And José Luis, you represent a group of citizens that are very highly impacted by automotion, mobility. If there's a dream in this shift in mobility, is moving from this measurement of time distance, which is mobility, to time substance. So what do you do while you go from one place to the other? In this sense, from the ONCE Foundation, you are seeing that you can play a very important role in this transition to the autonomous vehicles. Of course, like I said before, it's crucial for us to participate in this kind of developments, such as the autonomous electric cars, so that disabled people are taken into account, and we must know about their dreams. Carmen and myself have many colleagues who can't see, and obviously they can't drive. And for us, I am sure it would give them a lot of freedom and autonomy to be able to use this kind of interconnected vehicles and autonomous vehicles. But again, in the end, it is crucial for us to be part of that network of agents or stakeholders that will shape the new mobility networks in our cities, together with mobility businesses or companies, with the public transport organizers, and town halls, city halls, of course, all the network of stakeholders in the city. We want to be one of them. We want to be one partner. We want to be at the core of these developments, because we think that cities without people are not city, and it would make no sense. When we started creating cities about 4,000 years ago, back then in Syria, where some people started gathering around rivers to work together, to fish together or hunt together. Well, if they had not started there, we wouldn't have cities today. So cities are citizens with capital letters, all of them. Even if we have a very intelligent technological city, even if it's a big smart city, if they don't take people into account, if they are not a smart human city, they won't be able to serve those people. So they won't be really smart. That's clear. And I would like to finish this roundtable with an idea, maybe give an adjective to what alliances are in this sector. The meaning of alliances, where not all stakeholders will have the same role. Some will occupy some spaces, others will occupy other spaces, but we will all participate in that shift of mobility, infrastructure, vehicle, service, how it has also turned into a right recognized as such in the Spanish mobility strategy. So from that collective goal that we all have here in this mobility conference as a right, not as a service anymore, but as a right, alliances are, Filippo, what do you think? Give me an adjective. Crucial. This is what comes to my mind first. Alliances are crucial. And probably the transition to the multimodal or multi-service, these are indicators of what we've said before. Many components for cooperation between different entities. So it will be, and it should be already in our civil society, and it will be even more pushed by technology. The fact that it will be crucial to create this kind of link and cooperation. Necessary. If there's not a cooperation between all the sectors, this won't change. So I would say they are indispensable, absolutely necessary, so that we get a sustainable, fair and inclusive mobility. And José Luis? Well, because they've already said what they've said, I would say that alliances are an opportunity. They are the opportunity to create a better world where everyone can contribute. But I insist, what's really important in the end is the citizens, it's the people who will create this society, this future society. Well, we have a clock here. And they give us 75 minutes. It was supposed to be 60. We've been 5 minutes over our time. Thank you. So I think we behaved. And thank you for your attention. Thank you for coming to know about this project. This table is an example of what Mobility City wants to be. It's a bridge, a transition space. And this is the goal of the beautiful building I showed you before, the bridge by Hafa Hadid, and she's the only woman who won the Pritzker Award, the most prestigious one in architecture. So this is the goal of our project, to foster this spirit of creating alliances. That's why we create these roundtables. Thank you for the effort of being here, of coming, of speaking to us and contributing. Thanks for your contributions. to all of you, and we'll be glad to keep cooperating at SUM Bilbao. You're all invited to Zaragoza to get to know our bridge in a few months or 1 year. We hope to open it to the public, apart from the activities that we will keep organizing over this autumn, this fall season, and the 2022 year. Thank you very much.
Gracias.